Outside the L.A. County Courthouse is Moses Avalon. Moses is a record producer and an author, and he's going to help us understand the music business and how an eccentric guy like Phil Spector can become so hugely successful, even respected for his irreverence. Moses, thank you so much for being with us.
My pleasure.
So your book, before we get to Phil Spector, your book, which I read, is fascinating. It's called Confessions of a Music Producer. We're putting it up there for our viewers because I think our folks are going to want to go out and get a copy. But Moses, what exactly are you confessing to?
Well, there's prior to my book, there were only 2 or 3 books written about the music industry, and they were almost exclusively written by managers and attorneys and record executives. No one had ever written a book that tells the story from the perspective of the artist, and frequently, as in the case of Phil Spector and the Ronettes, the artist gets the short end of the stick on a lot of these deals. Record companies make millions and millions and millions of dollars, and they bolster the artist's image with videos on MTV and a certain lifestyle that really very few artists actually achieve.
Yeah, yeah. And it's a fascinating underworld, if you will. Again, Confessions of a Record Producer is the book. I urge you to get it. Tell us a little bit about the business environment in the music industry for those who know very little about it.
Well, it's a crazy environment, and it's known for being a crazy environment. And Phil Spector is in very good company. You know, people like Walter Yetnikoff, who was president of CBS Records, was famous for his screaming staff meetings. Irving Azoff, who managed the Eagles, there's a famous story about him. When the Eagles were unhappy with their hotel room because it wasn't big enough, he went down to the local hardware store and bought a chainsaw and cut down the walls between 2 rooms. You know, so Phil is in excellent company, and you know, Phil didn't just hold guns to the heads of women. He held the guns to the heads of some pretty tough guys. You know, John Lennon and the Ramones being among them.
Is that a true story, the John Lennon story?
Well, I wasn't there personally, but it is.
You're a little young. You're a little young to have been there.
Yes.
But it is music industry lore, and it takes me to something you wrote in your blog. A legend is going down despite a fair amount of reasonable doubt. So now let's talk about Phil Spector. Why do you think so?
Why do I think there's reasonable doubt?
Why do you think he's going down, and why do you think there's reasonable doubt? And if there is reasonable doubt, why won't he be acquitted?
Well, we don't know the outcome yet, of course, and you know, I don't think I should comment on the legal aspects of the trial, but just as a casual observer, it seems to me there is some reasonable doubt, but Phil just looks guilty. He looks like Dr. Zaius from Planet of the Apes and Kato Kalin on a bender, some combination of the two of that.
Just speak freely. Speak freely, Moses.
No matter how much good work it seems the attorneys are doing, and by the way, I think the attorneys on both sides are doing a fabulous job. No matter how much good work his attorneys are doing, as soon as you cut to Phil sitting there, we know, with the hands, he just looks like the kind of guy who would probably do this, and if it wasn't going to be Alana Clarkson, it was going to be somebody else some other day.
And then you hear all those prior bad act witnesses, you combine it with physical appearance, and I'm one, Moses, speaking from the legal point of view and legal strategy, I do believe appearance in the courtroom is very important. Your book, again, Confessions of a Record Producer. Speaking of confessions, let's take a listen to what Spector's driver says Phil Spector told him just moments after the fatal shot rang out.
Did Mr. Spector say anything to you?
Yes.
What did he say?
He said, "I think I killed somebody."
Was he directing this comment to you?
Yes.
When he said, "I think I killed somebody," what did you say then?
What happened, sir?
And what, if anything, did Mr. Spector do when you said, "What happened, sir"?
He moved his shoulders up.
So there we see Moses, we've called him a limo driver, but in fact it was a sedan. And I know you're not a lawyer, but a layperson understands the difference between murder and an accident. Phil Spector says this was a horrible accident. I've argued all along, Moses, that I think I killed somebody, blurted out suddenly, immediately after the shot rings out, is consistent with a horrible accident, especially when a man has a habit of waving a gun around. It doesn't necessarily have to be murder, which requires that next level of intent or purposefulness. And you suggest that in the music business, there's a lot of reckless behavior. It's almost as if we should be surprised that we don't see more of these kinds of cases.
Yes, well, we actually do, and you know, in my days as an engineer and a producer, I worked on many a rap record, and there was one session I recall in Queens where, while we're in the middle of a session, you know, a rival, I don't want to call them a gang, but a rival group entered the control room with guns, took everybody's gold chains and bling and the recording tapes and made off with it. And that was the kind of stuff that would happen, I wouldn't say daily, but it happens quite a lot.
Wow, wow. And little known to those of us outside the business. Take a listen, Moses, to an interview, and maybe you've read this, that Phil Spector gave to the London Telegraph back in 2002. This is before, of course, Lana Clarkson dies, describing his mental state. I was crippled inside, emotionally. Insane is a hard word, but manic depressive, bipolar. I take medication for schizophrenia, but I wouldn't say I'm schizophrenic. I have a bipolar personality, which is strange. I have devils inside that fight me. I am my own worst enemy. Now, these are not good words for the defense in this case, but given Phil Spector's notoriety in the business, maybe the rest of us didn't know it, but I would think his reputation preceded him. Was he known to have a reckless personality, and was it just accepted as part of the culture of the industry?
Absolutely. And I don't know if this has come out yet in this trial, but he was also in a near fatal accident where he was thrown through the windshield of his car and was almost pronounced dead. And it was only due to the diligence of a cop on the scene who took his pulse that he managed to survive it all. And I don't know if they're gonna play that card in this trial yet, but that's pretty well known as well.
No, and as you suggested several times, Moses, we're very early on in this case. A lot remains to be seen.